this afternoon. We're focusing on the 2023 budget statement. Ghanaians are expected to pay more taxes in the next year as government has revised two major tax handles, including the controversial electronic transfer levy. Now, we do know that value-added tax, for instance, the rate will be increased by 2.5 percentage points from 12.5% to 15%, whilst the electronic transfer levy rate will be reduced to 1% of the transaction value alongside the removal of the daily threshold. We can now listen to the Finance Minister address the House earlier today.
We will undertake the following actions, initiatives and interventions. Others, one, increase VAT rate by 2.5% to directly support our roads and digitalization agenda. Fast track the implementation of the Unified Property Rate Platform Program in 2023 and review the E-Levy Act and more specifically reduce the headline rate from 1.5% to 1% of the transaction value as well as the removal of the daily threshold. 3. To boost local productive capacity, we will, among others, cut the imports of public sector institutions that rely on imports either for inputs or consumption by 50%, and would work with the Ghana Audit Service and Internal Audit Agency to ensure compliance, support the aggressive production of strategic subsidies, including the list disclosed at the President's last address to the nation, support large-scale agriculture and agribusiness interventions through the Development Bank of Ghana and ADB Bank, introduce policies for the protection and incubation newly formed domestic industries to allow them to make the goods produced here competitive for local consumption and also for exports. To promote exports, we will, among others, expand our productive capacity in the rail sector of the economy and actively encourage the consumption of locally produced rice, poultry, vegetable oil, and fruit juice, ceramic tiles, among others. To pursue
well, the Finance Minister has also been touching on issues relating to the depreciation of the cedi.
Our inability to access the international capital markets meant that for the first time in our administration, we did not have the foreign currency to complement our foreign exchange earnings. We have had to make strenuous efforts to meet our import bill, which exceeds $10 billion annually. Considering our low foreign earnings, it has been difficult to meet our import requirements, including crude oil and petroleum products, of about $400 million a month. At the same time, Ministry of Finance still needs to find about $1 billion annually to keep our lights in our homes and workplaces on. Mr. Speaker, the demand for foreign exchange to support our unbridled demand for imports undermines and weakens the value of the cedi. This contributed to the depreciation of the cedi, which has lost about 53.8% of its value since the beginning of this year, compared to the average 7% annual depreciation of the cedi between 2017 and 2021. The current year's depreciation, which is driving the high cost of goods and services for everyone, is clearly an aberration and a very expensive one indeed. The increases in fuel prices, diesel currently above 20 cedis a litre and petrol 16.8 cedis a litre, has led to increases in prices of most goods and services. Inflation, which we managed to bring down from 15.4% at the end of 2016 to 7.9% at the end of 2019, and remained in single digits till the pandemic hit in March 2020, is now 40.4%. It is not only the individuals and households who are adversely affected by the depreciation of the cedi. For us at the Ministry of Finance, the depreciation of the cedi seriously affects our ability to effectively manage our debt. Indeed, our stock of debt has increased by 93 billion Ghana cedis this year alone due to the depreciation of the cedi since the beginning of 2022.
Let's speak to Charles Kwesi-Addo. He's with the More Money Agents Association. Charles, thank you for your time. So what's your reaction to the decision now by government to reduce the rate of the e-levy? Charles, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about the reaction of your group towards this announcement of a reduction in the e-levy charges.
Hello?
Yes, Charles, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about your reaction as a group to this announcement that we're getting from the Finance Minister.
Okay, thank you, Kofi. Good afternoon to your cherry viewers. We are happy though, but the most difficult thing that we were shocked to hear was the scrap of the 1 to 100 Ghana cedis cap. That's the government scrap, because we were made to understand earlier that majority of Ghanaians, which constitute the lower class, were those that were transacting within that range, and therefore government thinking of the poor and the needy will give them subvention, and only to be told that those things have been scrapped, and therefore anybody who transacts will be made to pay the 1%. So it's now a uniform or universal rate. But all the same, it is good though, because businesses that were trying to find alternative with regards to the hike in the e-levy, who I think and believe that will rise to the occasion and otherwise. Since goods and services have been also increased in terms of the VAT, but from 12.5 to 15%. So therefore, I think it is a good thing for our industry.
You did a research earlier, and you're pointing out to how the e-levy was affecting business. So given the fact that you now have 1% to work with, you may still have some difficulties, you agree?
Definitely, yes, Kofi. Like the research that was submitted to the Ministry of Finance towards the preparation of the 2023 budget, we stated the effect this e-levy has brought to us as agents, and we also advise government to make sure that they do a reduction to it so that it will involve a lot of people. But going forward, I'm happy that at least they've listened to us a bit. But what we are not happy, that is the most important thing. You know, with the mobile money ecosystem, we are being paid commission, and it's based on the number of transactions that you do. Then out of that, you get your commission. And when this 1% comes up, it is a good thing to us. And as such, we are believing and hoping that Ghanaians will rise to the occasion and get to understand what that 1% means. Because if we don't give much education, earlier we stated that the problem has to do with education, because we don't want a situation where a section of Ghanaians, be it the political, the minority side, will want to still peddle falsehood, and it will not make the sector attractive to our prospective customers. So we are only praying and hoping that government will employ educational sessions so that Ghanaians will understand the levy itself. Because even if it comes to 0.1% and the education still doesn't go down well with the populace, it's going to still affect our business.
So with this 1%, exactly what's your take in terms of the way forward? Should we be looking at a further reduction or an abolishment of the entire arrangement?
For that, I can't say that there's going to be another reduction. But looking at the situation now, the economic situation and the indicators, you realize that government wants to rake more revenue. That is why, even though he reduced the e-levy and then has at least add up at the VAT session. So I don't think there are still rooms for further reduction. But I am hoping and praying that there will be rooms for review. The review has to do with the cap. That is the most important aspect of it. We told government through the finance ministry, based on the research work, that at least it should be reduced and then cap certain transactions. We even suggested to them that probably from 1 Ghana cedis to 1,000 Ghana cedis should be capped. Not knowing they want to nullify even the 1 cedi to the 100 Ghana cedis. But going forward, I'm praying and hoping that they will want to still review the pros and cons with regards to the levy, so that people will have trust with the sector, and in so doing, it will also bring a lot of people to be agents, for him to also increase his commission.
Charles Kwesiado, thank you for joining us here on The Pulse. Well, some Ghanaians on the streets of Accra have been reacting to the budget presentation today by the Finance Minister.
And we are live from the fire service station. That's the Tudu area, the Accra Central. You can see in the background the hustle and bustle. In spite of all the economic conditions and the hardships, people are still going about their normal duties as we also prepare for the Black Stars to take over Portugal later today. And thankfully, I have a gentleman here with me. Let me interact with him. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Joy News channel. Your name, sir?
You're welcome. My name is Emmanuel.
Let's talk about the budget 2023. You know it's happening today. What are your expectations?
Our expectation is for the government to reduce everything. How the dollar will come down, the yield levy, Gov't levy, every levy on it, even including the petrol. We want the reduction of the petrol. Diesel is the cheapest thing in Ghana. Now the diesel has come to be the highest commodity in Ghana. But we beg the government to reduce the diesel, not the petrol, the diesel.
Why just diesel?
Yes, because when the government take the reduction from the petrol, then they add it to the diesel. So we want it to be taken. Every tax on the diesel and the petrol needs to be taken away for we the masses to be free. We are suffering.
But we are hearing already that there may be an introduction of a few taxes. Are you ready for that?
It will be difficult. With this hardship, it will be difficult.
But knowing the conditions, they need to put measures in place, don't you think so?
It's up to the government to put the conditions on for us to be free.
Looking at how hard the economy is, we are looking at something like the president should come and the finance minister, he should come and tell us something to at least cushion people's mind about how things are going to be lessened. Because now when we go to the market, the price of goods are high. If you look behind me, we sell jeans here. Now the price of jeans are so high that when you mention the price to people, they can't afford it.
How much is it going for now? Jeans like what I'm wearing today, how much is it?
Initially, it used to be 60 Ghana cedis. Now, jeans like what you're wearing is costing almost about 100 and 120 Ghana cedis. So you can see that.
Why?
Yes, it's all because of the importation duties, right? And then the hike of the dollar and then the CFA. So you can you know how things are now going. Yeah, that's it. So that's how we're selling it now.
We're told there may be introduction of new taxes as we present the budget today. Are you ready for new taxes?
You see, the country that we're living in is so hard for now. That is how we're experiencing it. So the introduction of new taxes I think, is going to bring more hardship to Ghanaians than what it was before. But let's look at how the taxes will be. If we Ghanaians, we don't accept those taxes, we're going to be on the streets and then demonstrate to the government that things are hard and then they should try as much as possible to lessen the hardship that we're going through.
Expecting that sometime the government will reduce the taxes, at least put in place some social measures to protect the poor, and at the same time give incentives to other businesses to run as very well. And then my major expectation is that the government should be able to control the exchange rate so that importing will be very easy for Ghanaians and the standard of living can improve for us.
We're told that ahead of the presentation there may be introduction of some new taxes because of the situation that we are in. We know we are going to the IMF amongst others. Are you ready for the introduction of new taxes?
I don't think Ghanaians are ready for new taxes. Listen, we are aware that they said they are going to increase, but let's look at now. Already we are burdened with a lot of taxes. Is it not proper for the government to look at the expenditure pattern and then reduce the expenditure so that we can gain revenue from that area? We are being told that there are 3 areas to look at. First of all, we have to look at our income level, we look at our expenditure, and then we look at getting new revenue. But always the government think about looking at new revenues rather than looking at the already existing revenues and then the expenditure.
Well, still on the budget, government says it is working to expand the coverage of the livelihood empowerment against poverty to some 2.5 million extreme poor individuals as estimated by the Ghana Living Standards survey. In addition to mitigate the impact of the increasing cost of living, government is promising to double the amount of LEAP grant from some 45 cities to 90 Ghana cities. Joining us via Zoom now is Deputy Director, Send Ghana, Dr. Emmanuel Ayifa. Thank you, sir, for your time here on the Pulse. So, earlier this year, you issued a report, comprehensive one, on why government needs to review the grant in terms of LEAP. Now we're targeting some 90 Ghana cities. Will that be sufficient in addressing some of the issues that you pointed out earlier this year?
Very much blessed for the opportunity to speak on the budget as the finance minister delivered on Parliament, on the floor of Parliament today. In fact, I was in another meeting, so I didn't really get much time to listen. But to go straight to your point, in fact, what we heard from the budget is a welcoming news for us. Because as you rightly put it, our report consistently have been highlighting the need to increase the cash grant and also to expand coverage. And that is exactly what the government is seeking to do in this new budget. We welcome it, it's a welcoming news. But however, the only concern has to do with the fact that if I remember in the budget, they spoke about 45 Ghana cedis or so. But the point is, even now, in terms of increment, in terms of how much a LEAP beneficiary receives, an individual, if it's a one-person household, it's 54 Ghana cedis bi-monthly. And then if it's a two-person,
Doctor, if we're having some challenges hearing you, probably it's due to the position of your microphone, but if you could just make that point for us again one more time, so we see if we could get you clearly. Dr. Ifa, are you still with us?
Yes.
Yes, so that's better now. Earlier, we're having some feedback from your microphone. You're making the point about government's commitment towards dealing with livelihood empowerment.
Yeah, so I indicated that this is a welcoming news because our report consistently has been recommending the need to increase, the cash grant amount, of course, considering the high inflationary pressures that we find ourselves in now. And also, we've also been calling on government severally to also expand the coverage. The fact that we have about 2.5 million, but currently it's covering just about 1.5. And so for us, it's a welcoming news. However, I was making the point that if you look at the amount that they want to increase, I don't know whether it's a mistake because they said they are going to increase it to 45 Ghana cedi. Meanwhile, currently, a one-person household, a LEAP member in the household receives 64 Ghana cedis bi-monthly. And then if you have a two-person household, it's 76. Three-person household is 88. More than 3, 4 and above is 106 bi-monthly. So I'm not very clear what the 45 is. And so even though we welcome the idea, maybe there's a mistake somewhere. I'm not so clear about.
Okay. But earlier this year, you talked about the need for us to get an ideal figure. What was that ideal figure in terms of the recommendation that you put forward?
Okay. So our recommendation was for government to look at the inflationary pressures and then, of course, increase it based on that. And then we said that it's important that it is always linked to current inflation. That is what we said. So if you are looking at the current inflation, if you have to use last month's inflationary figure, which is a little over 40%, that tells us that if there should be an increase in the LEAP cash grant, then obviously it should be more than the inflationary figure as we are having currently. But the fact is that these are monthly inflation that we are looking at. But it's important that government have to then factor and look at the year-to-year, end-of-year inflation, and then use that to calculate. So that is what we say. It shouldn't just be arbitrary, but the base should be based on inflation. That is what we've been talking about. We do not know what really went into this calculation, and for us, our major concern is that it seems to be contradictory. The currently as we have is 64, except that the budget is clearly stating that they are going to add 45 Ghana cedi to the already existing 64 Ghana cedi bi-monthly for one individual.
Now,
then
beyond
that should be okay.
Right, but beyond LEAP itself, you also touched on some other social interventions which needs to be addressed from a budgetary position, and of course you laid that out to the Finance Ministry as part of your open budget initiative.
Yes, I mean we normally would touch on school feeding, we touch on capitation grant, we touch on NHIS and all the other social intervention programs. I note from the budget that was read today that in terms of school feeding, they are seeking to increase the school feeding grants. No, the school feeding, they are seeking to, increase coverage. The point is that this same point was made in the 2022 budget. And then just about 4 months or so into the year, there was a reversal, a turnaround where the minister came to say that no, we are not going to see an increase. And so far, in fact, so far as we are hearing that the school feeding too is also going to see expansion and increase, we do welcome that. The good thing is that there were fears that because of this IMF, current IMF negotiation, most of these interventions were going to be affected. But at least the budget has brought us hope, just as the president committed that we're not going to see these things affected. For me, and of course for Ghana and all other civil society organizations in the social protection space, our hope is that it shouldn't just be a talk, but we should see action. Because the fact is that although we are looking at increments, there still have been consistent delays in releasing funds for all the social protection intervention programs. And so that is one thing that we hope that government will be committed to. But it wouldn't just be promises.
All right, then. We want to thank you for your time. That's Dr. Emmanuel Ayifa, Deputy Country Director, SEN Ghana. Let's take you to Parliament now, because minority is taking on government for failing to fashion out a plan that will provide relief for Ghanaians in this trying economic moment. Kweku Asante is our parliamentary correspondent, joins us via Zoom now. Kweku, and we understand that already the minority has briefed the press on what its views are on this 2023 budget statement. Tell us more. Quickly, if you can hear me, I'm just asking about the latest, what the concerns of the minority is. So we're still trying to reconnect to our parliamentary correspondent, Kweku Asante, who was there at the time the finance minister laid it all out. In fact, the minority equally has addressed the press on matters. Kweku, fill us in, give us some updates on the concerns by the minority, raised by the minority.
So we've been hearing from Dr. Kisela Tuposin, his ranking member on the finance committee. He said it's a killer budget. This is a budget that is going to compound the woes of the ordinary Ghanaian. We know that VAT is now going up by 2.5%. Although the e-levy has been reviewed from the existing 1.5%, and when this budget is passed, it will come to 1%. The threshold of 100 cedi limit per day, which would have attracted a tax, has also now been reviewed. So now you send any amount, even 1 cedi, 2 cedi, 3 cedi, they will pay 1% e-levy. That is if this budget is passed. There are also very key things in the budget. For instance, government can no longer employ into the public and civil service. The finance minister has announced a freeze in employment into the public service and the civil service as well. So these are the anchors on which Dr. Kiselatu is saying that this budget is just going to compound the problems of the ordinary Ghanaian. This budget is different in a lot of sense because we all know the build-up coming up to this 98 NPP MPs saying that if Ofori-Atta was not sacked, they were not going to sit in up until late Tuesday before the president and the party leaders were able to press upon them to do so. We have realized that when the finance minister announced some of the things that would have ordinarily led to cheers from the majority side, clapping hands and celebrating, all of that did not happen. The finance minister presented the budget in silence. The majority side sat there, did not say anything, as it were, to praise the minister for his performance. They did not do anything when he finished the presentation. So it was a different budget in certain senses, but now the minority say this budget is not what will offer hope to Ghanaians.
How about the response from the majority side?
So we heard from the Deputy Finance Minister, John Kumar. We also heard from another Deputy Finance Minister, Binal Siasari, who insists that this is the budget needed to turn the tide. This is the budget needed to bolster the fortunes of the Ghanaian people, and that they want Ghanaians to trust, they want Ghanaians to have an abiding faith in the ability of government to turn things around, and they expect that this budget is going to do the magic. But the minority are not happy about it. We've been trying to gauge the responses generally from the majority side about what they make of this. But this friction between government and party, between government and parliament, has made it in a way that normally after the budget you would have heard from the NPP MPs on the finance committee coming out to address press conference, to shower praise on the finance minister, to say a lot of things about the budget. They did not do so. This budget is fully being defended by the minister himself and his two deputies. Indeed, a press conference that was held afterwards was something that just these two MPs, who happen to be deputy ministers, had to defend. We have not heard from Apenyo Markin, we've not heard from the chairman of the finance committee. With my experience reporting on budgets, media budgets, and other set huge government policies, you will see key leadership in the various committees coming out to defend. But this hasn't happened. We just had the minister and his two deputies on the offensive, saying that this budget contains a lot of hope. But another key sticking point is that the debt restructuring is now in full swing, and we have a story on myjournal.com for viewers to go and read it. It sets out in detail. The minister announced, later his deputy announced, that there will be haircuts. Despite the president saying there will be no haircut, it appears now there will be ones, and the minister thought it wise to explain it that there will be debt exchange. But if you look at the statement, the domestic bondholders and other people are not going to get a full extent of their money. And the full explanation has not been offered by the deputy minister.
Kwaku Asante is our parliamentary correspondent. We also understand, obviously, that there'll be a raft of measures that will be rolled out in the coming years to check government expenditure. Here's Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta laying that out.
Efficiency in government expenditures will, among others, implement the government directives on expenditure measures, integrate procurement approval process with GIFMIS to ensure that projects approved are aligned with budget allocation, review key government programs to reflect relevance, promote efficiency, and ensure that value for money is achieved in all sectors, including OGM, and review the efficiency of statutory funds. To implement structural and public sector reforms, will, among others, impose a debt limit, on non-concessional financing, undertake major structural reforms in the public sector by reviewing the operations of 36 state-owned enterprises, 8 special purpose vehicles, 90 joint venture companies, 38 regulatory institutions, 68 statutory bodies, and 6 subvented organizations. Enforce compliance with legal and regulatory framework on foreign exchange, initiate measures to overhaul the tax structure in the extractive industry, expand the gold purchase program by the Bank of Ghana, to support foreign exchange reserve accumulation, promote an LBMA certified gold refinery in Ghana, and promote local currency stability. The goal now is to significantly enhance revenues, significantly cut down the cost of running government, significantly expand local production, invest more to protect the poor and vulnerable, continue expanding access to good roads and technology, education and health for every Ghanaian everywhere in Ghana and the diaspora. Mr. Speaker, this budget is therefore anchored on a 7-point agenda aimed at restoring macroeconomic stability and accelerating our economic transformation as articulated in the post-COVID-19 Program for Economic Growth, PCPEG. These comprise an agenda to 1, aggressively mobilize domestic revenue, 2, streamline and rationalize expenditures, 3, boost local productive capacity, 4, promote and diversify exports, 5, protect the poor and vulnerable, 6, expand digital and climate responsive fiscal infrastructure, and 7, implement structural and public sector reforms. To achieve these, there are 3 critical imperatives: successfully negotiating a strong IMF program, coordinating an equitable debt operations program, and attracting significant green investments. This will enable us to generate substantial revenue, create needed fiscal space for the provision of essential public services, and facilitate the implementation of the PCPEG program to revitalize and transform the economy.
Professor John Gachi is economist with the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, thank you for your time. Your take on the address today by the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta.
Interventions under the 7.
Yes, we've lost Professor Gachi there. You're still watching The Pulse. We'll be back after this break. And you're welcome back to The Pulse. There's more from the Finance Minister on government's goal for next year.
Our goal now is to significantly enhance revenues, significantly cut down the cost of running government, significantly expand local production, invest more to protect the poor and vulnerable, continue expanding access to good roads and technology, education and health for every Ghanaian everywhere in Ghana and the diaspora. Mr. Speaker, this budget is therefore anchored on a 7-point agenda aimed at restoring macroeconomic stability and accelerating our economic transformation as articulated in the post-COVID-19 Program for Economic Growth, PCPEG. These comprise an agenda to 1, aggressively mobilize domestic revenue, 2, streamline and rationalize expenditures, 3, boost local productive capacity, 4, promote and diversify exports, 5, protect the poor and vulnerable, 6, expand digital and climate responsive fiscal infrastructure, and 7, implement structural and public sector reforms. To achieve these, there are 3 critical imperatives: successfully negotiating a strong IMF program, coordinating an equitable debt operations program, and attracting significant green investments. This will enable us to generate substantial revenue, create needed fiscal space for the provision of essential public services, and facilitate the implementation of the PCPEG program to revitalize and transform the economy.
Let's speak now to Professor John Gachi, who's back on the telephone lines now with us. Prof, so you heard the Finance Minister there. In fact, we know that there are other measures that government is implementing just to try and take us out of this economic crisis. Your impression about today's budget statement?
Well, I think it's a laudable attempt to try to protect the vulnerable in society, because we all do know that the crisis has deepened poverty. It has actually drawn some other people into poverty line. So something ought to be done to protect them. As to whether there is an equitable and then transparent manner to support those who are deep down in poverty is another thing. Again, all the attempts to protect the vulnerable and those who are into poverty is eroded by increase in VAT by 2 percentage points, and also reducing the rate for the e-levy and expanding those who qualify to pay the e-levy. So that has been counterproductive in my view.
So your take is that the e-levy should be entirely abolished. Is that your view?
Well, I'm just assessing the motive for the budget. I think the motive for the budget is that you are trying to protect the vulnerable. And in an attempt to protect the vulnerable, the tax nets that have been opened has eroded whatever gain that is provided to the vulnerable. So it's not a question of whether you want to remove the e-levy entirely or not, but it's a question of assessing what has been done.
But beyond that as well, for the business community, what's going to be the implication knowing that, for instance, VAT will now be shooting up? And of course, Ghanaians should also be in mind, even as I put across that question.
Please, your voice.
Yeah, I was just talking about the VAT, the review on the figures, the implication for the business community, and also we're mindful of what the impact may be on Ghanaians. Yes.
So the implication of that on businesses is enhanced cost, and that will be passed on to consumers, and that will actually keep the momentum for prices going up for a period of time. So that should be assessed, and also any time that taxes are increased such that payment is becoming difficult, you also see evasion and evading of taxes rampant. So we will see a lot of people trying as much as possible to dodge payment of taxes because of the huge cost implications for the policy.
Government says it is rebuilding together. Do you see that, progress, looking at the statement that was presented by the finance minister today?
Well, I think the entire finance system is in chaos, but there are some other things that are laudable. For example, if you want to focus on creating the environment for the production of certain items that hitherto you have been importing, that will be commended. But if you look at the financing aspect, it's in chaos. We don't know whether we are doing debt restructuring or not. The finance minister is afraid to use the word debt restructuring when that is ongoing. So that is the balancing act that I want to talk about in the budget.
There's little about the IMF deal, but looking at our posturing and what it is, the measures that government is taking now, would that ready us into the deal next year?
Well, I think it's about making yourself ready for the IMF deal. So the IMF will definitely talk about freeze on employment. The minister has actually announced the freeze on employment. The IMF will call for a deeper cut in expenditure. That has been announced. The IMF has called for domestic debt restructuring. That is ongoing. So it's just making yourself ready for an IMF program. The IMF program is needed badly because of the credibility that it attaches to government programs and activities. So government so much needed the IMF program.
Professor John Gov't, thank you for talking to us this afternoon on The Pulse. Well, we've been...